The wrench hit the concrete floor with a metallic clang that echoed through Miller Auto like a death knell. 24 hours, grease monkey. Rico's voice dripped with contempt as he adjusted his designer sunglasses, even though the garage's fluorescent lights barely qualified as bright. Then this shithole becomes a parking lot for my new condos. Jack Miller didn't look up from the engine block. He was torquing. His hands, stained black with years of oil that no amount of scrubbing could remove, continued their methodical work. 43 foot-pounds on the head bolts. Precisely. Every time. I said I'm talking to you. Rico stepped closer, his Italian loafers crunching on metal shavings. Behind him, two men in expensive suits tried to look threatening while clearly uncomfortable in the working-class neighborhood. Jack finally straightened, wiping his hands on a rag that had been red once, maybe a decade ago. At 24, he had his father's build. Compact, solid, built for leverage rather than intimidation. Heard you the first time. Then you heard that your daddy's little legacy ends tomorrow at noon. Rico smiled, revealing teeth too white to be natural. Unless you've got $70,000 hiding under one of these rust buckets. The rain started then, hammering on the corrugated metal roof like nature itself was angry. Through the open bay door, Jack could see the street turning dark, puddles forming in the potholes the city never bothered to fix. That's when the truck appeared. It rolled into view like a ghost from another era, a 1955 Ford F-100, matte black where it wasn't rusted through, moving with the distinctive shudder of a dying transmission. It coughed, sputtered, and died right in front of the garage, blocking Rico's gleaming leased Porsche. Perfect, Rico snarled. More trash cluttering up my property. But Jack wasn't listening anymore. He was already walking toward the truck, rain soaking through his work shirt, because he'd just heard something that made his mechanic's heart skip a beat. That engine sound. That specific valve tick. Someone had hand-built that engine. Someone who understood that machines weren't just tools. They were legacy, memory, and pride welded into steel. The driver's door opened with a screech of metal on metal, and an old man stepped out. He looked like he'd been riding since before Jack was born, maybe before Jack's father was born. Weathered leather vest over a faded t-shirt, jeans worn white at the knees, and boots that had walked more miles than most people drove. Don't have towing money, kid, the old man said, his voice rough as gravel. His eyes, though, they were sharp, measuring, taking in everything. Rico laughed. Of course you don't. Hey, old-timer, you've got exactly 2 minutes to move that piece of junk before I have it scraped. The old man didn't even look at Rico. He kept his eyes on Jack. And Jack made a decision that would change everything. Get it inside, he said, already moving to release the parking brake. I don't leave a classic out in the rain. Rico's face went purple. You've got to be kidding me. You're closing in 5 minutes because I'm taking this dump tomorrow. Jack looked at him then, really looked at him, and spoke with the quiet certainty of a man who'd already lost everything that mattered. The bank doesn't own it until noon tomorrow. Until then, it's still Miller Auto. And Miller Auto doesn't turn away a 55 Ford. As he and the old man pushed the truck into the bay, Jack didn't see Rico's expression darken, didn't hear him mutter, "You're going to regret this, grease monkey." He definitely didn't notice the old man's slight smile, or the small patch on his vest, worn and faded, that read, Original 49. 6 hours earlier, Jack had been having a good day. Mrs. Chin's Civic was purring like a kitten after he'd replaced the timing belt, a job she'd been quoted $900 for at the dealership, and he'd done for $300. The look on her face when he started it up, when that engine noise she'd been terrified about disappeared, that made the slim profit margin worth it. My son said I should just buy a new car, she'd told him, pressing an extra 20 into his hand despite his protests. But Mr. Miller, your father, he fixed this car when I first bought it, 20 years ago. Said if I took care of it, it would take care of me. He was right, Jack had replied, because his father usually was. Thomas Miller had opened this garage in 1985, back when the neighborhood was different, when people fixed things instead of replacing them, when a handshake meant something. He'd taught Jack everything. How to listen to an engine's song, how to feel a problem through a wrench, how to treat every car like it mattered because to someone, it did. He died 3 years ago. Heart attack. Dropped dead right there by Bay 2, socket wrench still in his hand, trying to diagnose a misfire on a '67 Mustang. Jack had kept the garage running, but barely. The neighborhood had changed. Chain shops with fancy waiting rooms and free coffee had opened up. People wanted cheap and fast, not quality and careful. The regulars kept coming, people like Mrs. Chun who remembered Thomas, but there weren't enough of them. The bank had been patient, until they weren't. Jack was staring at the books when Rico walked in. He didn't knock. Men like Rico never did. Jackson Miller? He didn't wait for an answer, just dropped a manila envelope on the desk, right on top of the parts catalog Jack had been studying. Consider yourself served. Jack opened it, though he already knew what it would say. Foreclosure proceedings. $70,000 in arrears. 30 days to pay or vacate. Except the date said he had 24 hours. That's not right, Jack said quietly. The notice said 30 days. I bought your debt. Rico smiled like a shark. Well, my company did. Miller Auto Holdings, LLC. Nice ring to it, right? I'm allowed to accelerate the payment schedule. It's all legal. Check with a lawyer if you can afford one. Why? Why? Rico laughed. Look around, kid. This neighborhood is prime real estate now. Young professionals, coffee shops, boutique gyms. You know what they don't want? A grimy garage leaking oil into the groundwater. I'm doing you a favor, really. 70 grand for this property? That's generous. In 6 months, I'll sell it for 4 times that. Jack looked at his father's picture on the wall. Thomas Miller, holding up a trophy from a car show in 1992, grease under his nails and pride in his eyes. And if I don't sell? Rico shrugged. Then I foreclose tomorrow at noon, and you get nothing. Either way, I win. But if you sell now, at least you walk away with enough to start over somewhere else. Somewhere cheaper. Somewhere you belong. The way he said that last part, somewhere you belong, made Jack's jaw tighten. But he didn't rise to it. His father had taught him that too. Some fights you can't win with your fists. I need time to think. You've got until noon tomorrow. Clock's ticking, grease monkey. After Rico left, Jack sat in the silence of the garage. The building creaked around him, familiar sounds. The hum of the air compressor. The tick of cooling metal. The ghost of his father's voice. Every problem's got a solution, son. Sometimes you just gotta look at it from a different angle. But Jack couldn't see any angle here. He had $40 in his checking account. His tools were worth maybe $10,000 if he could find a buyer, but they were mostly his father's, and selling them felt like selling memories. He pulled out the bottle of whiskey he kept in the desk drawer, the good stuff. Save for the day he finally gave up, and poured himself 2 fingers. Then he heard the rain start, and then he heard that truck. The old man watched Jack work with the intensity of someone conducting an examination. Transmission linkage, Jack said, sliding out from under the truck. His shirt was soaked through, rain mixing with sweat and oil. The main rod sheared clean through. Metal fatigue. She's been compensating for a while. Probably felt rough shifting for months. 6 months, the old man confirmed. Kept meaning to bring her in. Jack stood, studying the truck with the reverence some people reserved for cathedrals. The body was rough, rust bubbling through the paint in places, one fender primer gray where someone had tried to patch it, but the engine was immaculate. Custom heads, polished intake manifold, carburetor that definitely hadn't come from a factory. Who built the motor? I did, the old man said. 1982. Boarded out 30 over, blueprint, everything, balanced and trued. It shows. Jack ran his hand along the fender, feeling the curves. They don't make them like this anymore. No, the old man agreed. They don't. Rico's voice cut through the moment like a knife. Are you seriously going to fix that thing? I told you you're done here. Jack ignored him, opening his tool chest. You can go now, Rico. Business hours ended 10 minutes ago. This is my property. At noon tomorrow. Until then, I've got work to do. Rico's face went through several shades of red before he turned and stormed out, his enforcers following. The Porsche's engine roared. Too loud, compensating for something, and then they were gone. The old man raised an eyebrow. Friend of yours? Something like that. Jack pulled out a trouble light, dragging it under the truck. This is going to take a while. The linkage rod. I don't have a replacement. Haven't seen one in probably 20 years. So I'm stuck here. No, Jack said, his voice distant, already solving the problem in his head. I can make one. The old man blinked. Make one. I've got a lathe in the back. Got the measurements. It's just steel, 4,140 chromoly if I'm doing it right. I'll need to case harden it after machining, but yeah, I can make one. How much? Jack looked at him then, really looked. The worn vest, the faded jeans, the boots with the heels ground down on one side from years of shifting gears. The way the old man's hand had gone to his wallet, but hesitated. He thought about Mrs. Chun, about the 20 extra dollars she couldn't afford, about his father, who'd once spent 3 days rebuilding an engine for a veteran who couldn't pay, who'd said, "Some debts can't be measured in money, son. Let's worry about that after it's fixed," Jack said. The lathe sang its metallic song, cutting through steel with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel. Jack had learned to run it from his father, who'd learned from his father, back when men built things with their hands and took pride in the work. The machine was older than Jack, probably older than the truck he was fixing, but properly maintained, properly respected, it still cut true. The old man, he'd introduced himself as Elias, just Elias, sat on a rolling stool, nursing a cup of coffee from the ancient Mr. Coffee machine in the corner. "You always work this late?" Elias asked. "When I need to." Jack adjusted the feed rate, watching the cutting tool bite into the stock. Metal curls fell away like silver ribbons. Dad used to say a job's not done until it's done right. Time doesn't matter. Wise man. He was. Jack checked the measurement with calipers. "Died in this garage. Right over there by Bay 2. That why you're fighting to keep it?" Jack stopped the lathe, studying the partially formed linkage rod. "You know about Rico?" Hard not to hear him. Elias sipped his coffee. Man likes the sound of his own voice. "He wants the land. Bought my debt somehow. Accelerated the payment. I've got until noon tomorrow." "You got $70,000? "I've got 40. Jack laughed, but there was no humor in it. $40 and a garage full of tools that aren't worth enough. So why not just sell? Take his offer, start fresh somewhere else." Jack was quiet for a long moment, the only sound the hum of the building's old fluorescent lights. Then he gestured around the garage, at the walls covered with pictures of cars his father had fixed, at the pegboard where every tool hung in its exact place, at the oil stains on the concrete that had been there since before Jack was born. "This is Miller Auto," he said simply. "It's all I've got left of him, of what he built, what he believed in." He turned back to the lathe. "Besides, where else am I going to find a place with a lathe old enough to make parts for a '55 Ford?" Elias smiled at that, a real smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "That's a fair point." They worked in comfortable silence after that, Jack machining the linkage rod in stages, checking and rechecking every measurement. Elias watched, occasionally asking questions that revealed a deep understanding of mechanical systems. Around midnight, Jack started the case hardening process, heating the steel in the furnace he used for tool repairs, then quenching it in oil. The smell filled the garage, hot metal and petroleum, the perfume of creation. "You know engines," Jack said while they waited for the steel to cool. "Built cars. Bikes," Elias corrected. "Started when I was 16. 1966. Bought a wrecked Harley Panhead from a junkyard for $50. Took me 2 years to rebuild it, learning as I went." Panhead. Those are legends. It was a legend because I made it one. Elias's eyes were distant, remembering. Rode that bike for 20 years. 48 states, 3 times to Mexico, once to the Arctic Circle on a dare. "What happened to it?" "Gave it to my son when he turned 21. He still has it. Rides it every Sunday." Jack thought about that, about legacy, about things that lasted, about fathers and sons and the ties that bound them through steel and gasoline. Around 3 in the morning, he installed the new linkage rod. It fit perfectly, sliding into place with the satisfying click of proper engineering. He adjusted the linkage, checked the cable tension, then slid behind the wheel. The truck started on the first turn of the key. The engine rumbled to life, that distinctive sound of hand-built machinery, and the transmission shifted smoothly through all the gears. Perfect. Elias walked around the truck, checking Jack's work with the eye of someone who knew what to look for. He crawled underneath with a flashlight, inspected the linkage installation, tested the shifts himself. When he climbed out, he was nodding. Better than it was before. "Clean installation," Jack said, wiping his hands. "Properly torqued, properly aligned. Should last another 40 years. What's the damage?" Jack looked at the clock. 4:30 in the morning. In 7.5 hours, Rico would come to take everything. This was probably the last repair he'd ever do at Miller Auto. He thought about charging what the work was worth, $500 for the custom fabrication, maybe more. He thought about his $40, about the foreclosure notice. Then he looked at Elias, at the worn wallet the old man was pulling from his vest pocket, and he made his choice. Loose connection in the linkage, Jack said. Tightened it up, did some preventive maintenance. No charge. Elias stared at him. Those sharp eyes, reading everything. He knew Jack had fabricated the part from scratch. Knew it had taken hours of skilled labor. Kid, it's on the house, Pop. Jack managed a tired smile. Just keep her running. Elias stood there for a long moment, and something changed in his expression. Something that looked almost like respect, maybe like recognition. You respect the iron, he said quietly. The iron respects you. He reached into his vest pocket and pulled out a business card, worn at the edges, the print faded. He handed it to Jack. You ever need anything, Elias said. Anything at all. You call that number. Jack looked at the card. It was blank except for a phone number. No name, no business, nothing else. I don't understand. You will. Elias climbed into his truck, the engine purring now. Take care of yourself, Jack Miller. The truck rolled out into the pre-dawn darkness, taillights disappearing around the corner. Jack stood in the empty garage, the business card in his hand, and wondered what he'd just done. He didn't know it yet, but he'd just earned the protection of the most dangerous man in 3 states. He didn't know that the worn leather vest Elias wore had a patch on the back that read, Iron Horseman MC, and beneath it, in letters that had faded but never disappeared, Founder. He didn't know that the phone number on that card was the most valuable thing he'd ever been given. All he knew was that he'd fixed a truck for an old man who couldn't pay, and that in 7 hours, Rico was going to take his father's garage. Jack locked up, climbed the stairs to the small apartment above the shop where he'd lived since his father died, and collapsed into bed. He didn't sleep. The morning came too fast and too slow at the same time. Jack stood in the shower, washing off the night's work, watching oil and sweat circle the drain. The water heater was dying, another thing he couldn't afford to fix, and ran cold after 5 minutes. He barely noticed. At 10 o'clock, he started packing. Not everything, just the personal things. His father's trophy from that car show. The picture of his parents on their wedding day, his father in a suit he probably wore once, his mother in a dress she'd sewn herself. The old toolbox, the first one Thomas Miller had owned, beat up and dented, worth nothing to anyone but priceless to Jack. He left his father's tools hanging on the pegboard. Whoever bought the building would probably throw them away, but Jack couldn't bring himself to take them down. That felt too final. At 11 o'clock, Mrs. Chin came by. She'd heard somehow. The neighborhood had a way of knowing things. I have some money saved, she said, pressing an envelope into his hands. It's not much, but I can't take this. Jack tried to give it back, but she refused, her small hands surprisingly strong. Your father helped me when my husband died, when I had nothing. He said, someday, you help someone else. Today, I help his son. There was $800 in the envelope. Jack's eyes burned. Thank you, he managed. She patted his arm and left, and Jack added the money to his $40. $840. Not even close to enough, but it meant something anyway. At 11:45, the rumble started. At first, Jack thought it was thunder. The sky had been threatening rain all morning, dark clouds rolling in from the west. But this was different. This was rhythmic, mechanical, growing louder. He stepped out of the garage just as Rico's Porsche pulled up, followed by a black SUV. Rico emerged wearing a suit that probably cost more than Jack's truck, flanked by 3 men who'd clearly been hired for their size rather than their intelligence. Right on time, Rico announced, checking an expensive watch. Actually, I'm early. How generous of me. He gestured to one of his men, who was carrying a briefcase. I brought the paperwork. You sign this. I give you a check for $70,000, and we're done. Clean and simple. And if I don't? Rico smiled. Then at noon, this place becomes mine anyway, and you get nothing. I'll have the sheriff here in 5 minutes to escort you off the property. Your choice, grease monkey. Take the money or take a hike. The rumble was getting louder. Some of Rico's men were looking around, confused. Is that a truck? One of them asked. Ignore it, Rico snapped. He held out a pen to Jack. Last chance. Sign, or I call the sheriff. Jack looked at the pen, at the papers, at Rico's smug face. He thought about his father, about legacy, about giving up. Then he heard the roar. It wasn't a truck. It was bigger than that, louder than that. The first motorcycle appeared at the end of the block. Then another. Then 10, 20, 50. They kept coming, filling the street, the sound of their engines shaking the windows of the buildings. Harley-Davidsons, mostly. Big touring bikes, choppers, custom builds that looked like rolling works of art. All of them ridden by men and women in leather vests. All of those vests bearing the same patch. Iron Horseman MC. They lined up on both sides of the street, creating a corridor that led straight to Miller Auto. Their engines idled in perfect synchronization, a wall of sound that made Rico's Porsche seem like a child's toy. Rico's face had gone from smug to confused to worried. What the hell is this? The last motorcycle appeared at the end of the corridor. A vintage Harley, probably from the 1940s, perfectly restored, ridden by a man in worn leathers. No, not just a man. Elias. But he looked different now. Not like a down-on-his-luck drifter, but like exactly what he was. Someone who commanded absolute respect. The other riders, some of them looking terrifying enough to make Rico's enforcers seem like mall security guards, straightened up as he approached. Elias killed his engine and dismounted. The other engines died one by one. The silence after all that noise somehow more intimidating than the sound had been. He walked up the corridor, every eye on him. He was wearing the same vest as before, but now Jack could see the back of it clearly. Iron Horseman MC, Original 49, Founder. And beneath that, in smaller letters, Elias, Iron Thorn. Rico recovered first, his arrogance rushing back. Look, I don't know who you think you are, but this is a private business transaction. You and your friends need to move along before I call the police. Elias ignored him completely. He walked straight to Jack, those sharp eyes taking in everything. The packed box, the resignation on Jack's face, the defeat. I thought I told you to call if you needed anything, Elias said quietly. I didn't want to bother you, Jack replied. You already did enough. Did I? Elias turned to look at the garage. How much you owe? 70,000. And he's offering you what? Elias nodded at Rico. The same. If I sign right now. Elias looked at Rico for the first time, and something in that gaze made the developer take a step back. That your final offer? This has nothing to do with you, old man. Rico tried to sound tough, but his voice cracked slightly. This is between me and Miller. Wrong. Elias's voice carried across the street, even though he wasn't shouting. Jack Miller is under the protection of the Iron Horseman. That makes it my business. A man stepped forward from the crowd of bikers. He was huge, easily 6'5", arms covered in tattoos, with a beard that reached mid-chest. His vest read, President, beneath the club patch. Hammer, Elias said. Did we bring the package? Yes, sir, Founder. The giant's voice was surprisingly respectful. He snapped his fingers, and another biker came forward carrying a metal briefcase. Elias opened it. It was full of cash, neatly banded stacks of $100 bills. 70,000, Elias said, pulling out the stacks and dumping them at Rico's feet. Debt paid in full. Now get off our property before I lose my patience. Rico stared at the money. Our property? This isn't your. I just bought it. Elias pulled out a checkbook, wrote quickly, and handed it to Jack. Consider this an investment. Miller Auto is now the official service center for the Iron Horseman. All 500 members, all their bikes, all their custom work. You interested? Jack looked at the check. It was for $200,000. I can't. You can, and you will. Elias's voice softened. You gave me something last night that I haven't seen in a long time. You showed me that respect and skill still matter. That there are still people who care about the work more than the profit. He gestured around the garage. Your father built something good here. Something worth saving. I'm just making sure it doesn't die. Rico finally found his voice. This is illegal. You can't just what? Hammer stepped forward, and suddenly all the other bikers were standing too, a silent wave of leather and steel. The Founder's buying a property. All legal. All proper. You got a problem with that? Rico looked at his enforcers. They were backing toward the SUV. One of them was already in the driver's seat, engine running. You'll regret this, Rico said. But he was retreating too, leaving the cash on the ground. I have lawyers. I have connections. You'll what? Elias's voice cut like a blade. I've been in this city for 50 years. My club has chapters in 8 states. We have lawyers too. Better ones. And we have something else. We have patience and very long memories. He took a step toward Rico, and the developer actually stumbled backward. Here's what's going to happen, Elias continued, his voice conversational now, which somehow made it more terrifying. You're going to get in your fancy car. You're going to drive away. And you're never going to bother Jack Miller again. Not with debt collectors, not with lawyers, not with anything. Because if you do, he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Rico scrambled into his Porsche. His enforcers were already gone in the SUV. The sports car's engine whined as he reversed too fast, nearly hitting a parked car, then roared away down the street. The bikers watched him go. Then, one by one, they started to laugh. It began with small chuckles, then grew into full belly laughs that echoed through the neighborhood. Hammer bent down and scooped up the cash Rico had left behind. Founder, he forgot his money. Finders keepers. Elias turned back to Jack. You're going to need it for renovations. This place needs work. Jack was still staring at the check. Why? Why would you do this? You really have to ask? Elias smiled. Last night, when you could have charged me $500, money you desperately needed, you chose to help instead. You saw an old man with an empty wallet and a truck that mattered to him, and you did the right thing. It was just a repair. No. Elias's voice was firm. It was a test. One you didn't even know you were taking. And you passed. He gestured to the assembled bikers. The Iron Horsemen have been around for 76 years. We've survived wars, economic collapses, crackdowns, and betrayals. You know how? By recognizing people who understand what matters. Honor, respect, skill. You have all three. He held out his hand. So I'm asking again. Miller Auto becomes our official service center. You handle the maintenance, repairs, and custom work for the club. We pay fair rates. More than fair, actually. You build your business back up. Deal. Jack looked at the hand, at the man offering it, at the garage his father had built. He thought about Thomas Miller, who'd always said, help comes when you least expect it, from people you'd never imagine. But it only comes if you deserve it. Jack took the hand. Deal. The bikers erupted in cheers, engines roaring to life in celebration. But Jack's troubles weren't quite over. 3 days later, Rico made his move. Jack was under a Harley, replacing a clutch cable, when he heard the trucks pull up. Heavy trucks, the kind that carried equipment. He slid out from under the bike to find 4 men in hard hats stepping into the garage, followed by someone in a suit carrying a clipboard. Jackson Miller? The suit didn't wait for confirmation. I'm serving you notice of immediate eviction and building demolition. You have 30 minutes to clear your personal property before we begin teardown. Jack stood, wiping his hands. That's not possible. I own this building now. According to our records, this property is still held by Westside Development Holdings, LLC. The demolition permit was issued 3 weeks ago. He thrust papers at Jack. It's all here. Legal and binding. Jack scanned the papers. They looked official, county seals, signatures, dates. But the dates were wrong. These were filed before Elias had bought the property. This is fake, Jack said. Someone backdated these. That's a serious accusation. The suit smirked. But it doesn't change the fact that we have a legal demolition order. If you have a problem, take it up with the county. In the meantime, we're moving forward. One of the hard hats fired up a sledgehammer compressor. The sound was deafening in the enclosed space. Jack pulled out his phone, calling the number Elias had given him. It rang once before a voice answered. Hammer. This is Jack. I've got a problem. Talk. Jack explained quickly. In the background, he could hear motorcycle engines. Don't let them touch anything, Hammer said. We're 10 minutes out. But 10 minutes was too long. The suit was gesturing to his crew. Start with the windows. I want this place opened up. Stop. Jack stepped forward. You take one swing at my building. Oh. You'll what? The suit's smirk widened. Call the cops. They'll side with the legal demolition order. Face it, Miller. You lost. Rico wins. The sledgehammer swung toward the nearest window. Jack moved without thinking, grabbing a torque wrench from his bench. He wasn't a fighter, never had been, but he also wasn't going to stand there and watch his father's garage destroyed. He didn't get far. 2 of the construction workers grabbed him, arms built from years of manual labor pinning him easily. That's assault, the suit said cheerfully. I'll add that to the police report. Really, this just keeps getting better. The sledgehammer hit the window. Safety glass exploded inward, glittering in the fluorescent light. And then the world started to shake. It wasn't subtle this time. The floor literally vibrated, tools rattling on their pegboards, the picture frames on the wall tilting. The construction workers froze. Is that an earthquake? No, Jack said, and he couldn't help but smile. That's karma. The sound hit like a physical force. Hundreds of motorcycles, all arriving at once, all throttling up in perfect synchronization. It was louder than before, more coordinated, more intentional. The Iron Horsemen filled the street, the parking lot, the alley behind the building. They surrounded Miller Auto in a wall of chrome and leather and barely contained violence. Elias arrived on his vintage Harley, Hammer beside him on a bike that looked like it could pull a house down. They dismounted in unison, and this time, there was nothing friendly about their approach. Who? Elias said quietly. Broke my mechanic's window? The suit had gone pale. We have a legal demolition order. Let me see it. Elias took the papers, studied them for maybe 30 seconds, then handed them to a woman who'd stepped forward from the crowd. She was in her 50s, dressed in business casual, with a leather vest over her blouse that identified her as the club's secretary. Marlene, Elias asked. She scanned the documents, pulled out her phone, made 2 calls, then looked up. Forgeries. The permit numbers don't exist in the county database. These were created yesterday and backdated. Interesting. Elias turned back to the suit. You just attempted to illegally demolish private property using fraudulent documents. That's what, Marlene? 5 years. 7 to 10, she confirmed. Plus the cost of damages, plus. I get it. The suit was backing toward the trucks. Look, I was just hired to do a job. I didn't know. You knew. Hammer's voice was thunder. Question is, who hired you? Silence. The suit wasn't talking. Elias nodded to 2 of the bikers. They weren't huge like Hammer, but they moved with the confidence of people who'd done this before. They walked to the trucks, looked inside, came back with a briefcase. Inside was a contract, signed by Rico, promising $50,000 for immediate demolition services, no questions asked. There's your answer, Elias said. He pulled out his phone, dialed, spoke briefly. When he hung up, he was smiling. Police are on their way. Also called a friend at the DA's office. Rico's going to have an interesting afternoon. The suit bolted, running for the trucks. The construction workers didn't even try to stop the bikers from blocking their escape. They just stood there, hands up, waiting for the cops. Elias walked to where Jack was still being held by the 2 workers. They let him go immediately. You okay? Elias asked. Better now. Jack looked at the broken window. Need to replace that. We'll handle it. Elias raised his voice. Who here knows glass work? 3 hands went up. And who can handle some drywall patching? 5 more. Electrical? Plumbing? General carpentry. By the time he was done, half the club had volunteered. Looks like we're doing renovations, Elias announced. Miller Auto is closed for the weekend. Monday, it reopens as the best damn motorcycle garage in the state. The bikers cheered. Jack just stood there, overwhelmed. I can't ask you to. You didn't ask. We're offering. Elias clapped him on the shoulder. Besides, most of these guys haven't had an honest day's work in years. Do them good. The weekend transformation of Miller Auto was something Jack would remember for the rest of his life. The Iron Horsemen descended on the garage like a well-organized army. Turns out, when you have 500 members spanning 3 generations, you accumulate a lot of skills. The glass workers replaced all 4 windows by Saturday afternoon, upgrading them to impact-resistant safety glass. The carpenters reinforced the bay doors and built new storage shelves. The electricians rewired the entire building, installing LED lighting that actually let Jack see what he was working on. The plumbers replaced the ancient water heater and fixed the perpetually dripping bathroom sink. But it was more than just repairs. Someone showed up with industrial-grade tool chests, 6 of them, brand new, bright red, each one organized for specific work. Engine tools, suspension tools, electrical diagnostics, wheel and tire equipment, specialty fabrication, and one marked custom builds only. Someone else brought a hydraulic lift system to replace the old scissor jacks, professional grade and capable of handling the heaviest touring bikes safely. A third person, a quiet woman in her 60s who introduced herself as Sandpaper Sally, arrived with an entire mobile paint booth. For custom work, she explained. Can't run a proper shop without proper finishing. By Sunday evening, Miller Auto looked like a different place. The concrete floor had been sealed and epoxied in the club's colors, black with silver flake. The walls were painted, the ceiling tiles replaced, the ancient fluorescent lights swapped for bright LEDs. The office had new furniture, a modern computer system for invoicing, and a coffee maker that actually worked. Elias surveyed the work with satisfaction. Not bad for 2 days. Not bad. Jack was still in shock. This is incredible. I don't know how to thank you. Thank us by being the best mechanic in the state. Elias handed him a leather vest. It was new, the leather still stiff, smelling of tanning and promise. On the back, it read, Iron Horseman MC, and beneath that, official support. You're not a member, Elias explained. This designates you as under the club's protection and support. Wear it when you work on our bikes. It lets people know your family. Jack put it on. It fit perfectly. That night, after everyone had left, Jack sat in the transformed garage and called his mother. She'd moved to Arizona after his father died, couldn't bear to stay in the city that reminded her of Thomas every day. Mom, you sitting down? Because I have a story to tell you. Monday morning, Miller Auto officially reopened. Jack arrived at 6 a.m. to find a line of motorcycles already waiting. Not Iron Horsemen, regular customers. People who'd heard about the garage's transformation, who'd been recommended by club members, who wanted to see if the rumors were true. By noon, Jack had bookings for the next 3 weeks. Mrs. Chen came by with lunch, homemade dumplings and tea. I told everyone at the community center, she said proudly, about how you helped the old man and how he helped you. People like that story. They want to support you. The afternoon brought the first official Iron Horseman service appointment. A young guy, maybe 30, on a road king that had seen better days. Named Spider, he introduced himself. Been riding this girl for 8 years. She's getting rough around the edges. Jack spent an hour going over the bike completely. The list was long: worn brake pads, tired suspension, oil leak from the primary cover, clicking in the transmission, handlebars that vibrated at highway speeds. I can fix all of it, Jack said. But it'll take a few days, and probably $3,000 in parts. Spider whistled. That's steep. It's fair. I can show you the pricing. No. Spider waved it off. I mean, it's steep that I let her get this bad. My fault, not yours. When can you start? Tomorrow morning? Perfect. Hey, you do custom work. That became the theme. Every Iron Horseman who came in had ideas for modifications, improvements, personalizations. Word spread quickly. Jack Miller wasn't just a mechanic. He was an artist who worked in metal and gasoline. 2 weeks later, Rico's legal problems came to a head. The DA's office had investigated the fraudulent demolition order and traced it back to Rico. Combined with financial irregularities in his other properties and some creative accounting that looked a lot like fraud, Rico was facing serious charges. The trial was short. Rico tried to claim he'd been set up, that the Iron Horseman had fabricated evidence, but the paper trail was too clear. He'd gotten greedy, tried to strong-arm too many people, cut too many corners. He got 7 years. Jack didn't attend the trial. He was too busy working on a custom build, a 1948 panhead that someone had found in a barn, covered in rust and bird droppings, that Jack was bringing back to life. But Elias came by the garage that evening with the news. Justice served, he said simply. Good. Jack was torquing down a cylinder head, concentrating on the precise pressure. Thanks for making it happen. We didn't make it happen. We just made sure it happened fairly. Elias watched him work. You're getting faster. Practice. I've done more engine rebuilds in the last 2 weeks than I did in the last 6 months. And they're all perfect. Elias ran his hand along the panhead's frame. This is going to be beautiful. It's for Hammer, Jack said. His father's bike. He found it after his dad died. Wanted to restore it, but didn't trust anyone else with the work. And he trusts you. Apparently. Jack looked up. Why, though? I mean, I appreciate everything, but I still don't understand why you did all this. It wasn't just about the truck. Elias was quiet for a moment, then sat down on one of the rolling stools. 1949, he said finally. I came back from the war angry. Didn't know what to do with myself. Started riding, started fighting, started the club with some other guys who felt the same way. We were outlaws. Real ones, not the weekend warrior kind you see now. He gestured around the garage. We did things I'm not proud of, but we had a code. Respect, loyalty, brotherhood. Those things mattered when nothing else did. Over the years, the club changed, grew, got more legitimate. My son took over as president in 1985, ran it clean. His son's running it now. That's Hammer. 3 generations, all trying to live up to something I started when I was angry and 20 years old. Elias looked at Jack directly. Last month, I was thinking about selling the truck. Thought maybe it was time to let go of the past. Then it broke down, right in front of your garage. And you, a kid I'd never met, who was about to lose everything. You spent all night fixing it because it was the right thing to do. That's why, Elias continued. Because you reminded me why I started the club in the first place. Not for the bikes, or the reputation, or the territory. For the brotherhood. For the idea that when someone needs help, you help them. No questions, no conditions, just because it's right. Jack didn't know what to say to that. Besides, Elias added with a smile, you're a hell of a mechanic. And my truck runs better than it has in 20 years. 6 months after that rainy night when Elias's truck broke down, Miller Auto was thriving. Jack had hired 2 assistants, both young mechanics who'd been washing out of chain shops, talented but frustrated by corporate policies that prioritize speed over quality. Under Jack's training, they blossomed. The garage had expanded into the empty building next door, adding space for custom fabrication and paint work. Sandpaper Sally had set up a permanent shop there, teaching Jack the art of perfect finishes. The Iron Horseman contracts alone would have kept the business solvent, but word had spread beyond the club. Motorcycle enthusiasts from 3 states were making appointments, bringing rare bikes and impossible problems, knowing Jack would find solutions. Mrs. Chin's Civic sat in Bay 1, getting its 100,000-mile service. Jack had insisted on doing it himself. You were my first customer after the reopening, he told her. That means something. She smiled, pressed another envelope of money into his hand despite his protests. This time it contained a $1 bill and a note. For luck. You don't need my charity anymore, but you'll always have my friendship. That evening, after the garage closed, Elias stopped by. This was becoming a routine. The old man would come by every Friday, drink coffee, watch Jack work, share stories. But tonight was different. Got something to show you, Elias said. He led Jack outside, where a trailer was parked. Under the tarp was a motorcycle. But not just any motorcycle. A 1966 Harley-Davidson Panhead, completely restored, gleaming in the streetlight. This is the bike, Elias said quietly. The first one I ever built. I gave it to my son, remember? I remember. He gave it back to me last week. Said it belonged with me. Elias pulled the tarp completely off. I want you to have it. Jack's breath caught. I can't. You can, and you will. Elias's voice was firm. This bike represents everything I believe in. Craftsmanship. Perseverance. The idea that if you build something right, it lasts forever. He put his hand on Jack's shoulder. You embody those same things. This bike belongs with someone who understands what it means. But it's your history. And now it's your future. Elias smiled. Besides, I've got the truck. That's enough memories for one old man. Jack walked around the Panhead, taking in every detail. It was perfect. Museum quality. Worth easily 6 figures to the right collector. There's a title in the saddlebag, Elias continued. Already signed over to you. All legal. All yours. Why? Jack asked, though he was starting to understand the answer. Because 6 months ago, you helped an old man with a broken truck. You didn't do it for money or recognition or reward. You did it because it needed doing. Elias gestured at the transformed garage, at the thriving business, at the life Jack had rebuilt. This is what happens when you do the right thing. Not always, not for everyone. But sometimes, if you're lucky and the universe is paying attention, it comes back to you 1,000-fold. Jack thought about his father, who'd believed in helping people even when it cost him. Who'd said that a man's worth wasn't measured in his bank account, but in the lives he'd touched. He thought about Mrs. Chun, who'd given him money when he had nothing, paying forward the kindness his father had shown her. He thought about Elias and the Iron Horseman, who'd saved his business and given him a future when he'd been ready to give up. Thank you, he said finally, inadequately. Don't thank me. Earn it. Elias headed for his truck. Make that bike proud. Make yourself proud. Keep building things that matter. He drove away, the old Ford's engine purring smoothly. A reminder of that rainy night, of the choice Jack had made, of how one act of kindness could change everything. 1 year after the reopening, the Iron Horsemen held their annual rally in the city. Over 1,000 bikers descended on the area, filling hotels, restaurants, and roads. It was a massive event, carefully organized, with the club working with city officials to ensure everything ran smoothly. The rally's official headquarters? Miller Auto. Jack had expanded again, taking over the entire block. The original garage was now the main service center. The building next door housed the custom shop and paint booth. The third building had become a motorcycle museum, showcasing rare bikes that club members had restored, including Elias's original Panhead, which Jack displayed with a plaque explaining its significance. On the rally's final night, Elias stood in the center of the garage, surrounded by hundreds of bikers, and told the story. He told them about the rainy night, the broken transmission, the mechanic who'd worked all night on a truck for a stranger. He told them about integrity and skill and doing what's right when no one's watching. Jack Miller, Elias concluded, represents everything the Iron Horsemen stand for. He is officially named the club's master mechanic and honorary brother. Hammer came forward with a new vest. This one read, Iron Horseman MC, and beneath it, Honorary Brother, Master Mechanic. It was the highest honor the club could give to someone who wasn't a full member. Jack accepted it with tears in his eyes, thinking about his father, wishing Thomas could see this moment. But maybe he could. Maybe somewhere, Thomas Miller was smiling, proud that his son had kept the faith, had maintained the standards, had proven that good work and good character still mattered. The party went late into the night. Music, laughter, stories shared among friends and family. Mrs. Chun was there, beaming with pride. Jack's assistants were there, already wearing their own support vests, learning the culture they were now part of. Around midnight, Jack found himself outside, looking at the garage he'd almost lost, at the business he'd rebuilt, at the community he'd found. Elias joined him, 2 beers in hand. You did good, kid, the old man said. I had help, Jack replied. You earned that help. Elias clinked his beer against Jack's. That's the difference. The world is full of people who want something for nothing. But every once in a while, you meet someone who understands that nothing worth having comes easy. That skill and integrity and hard work still matter. That's you. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the party inside, the family they'd both found in unexpected places. Your truck ever need work? Jack said. Bring it by? On the house. Elias laughed. Not a chance. You charge me full price, same as everyone else. That's respect. Fair enough. Jack smiled. But the coffee's still free. Now that, Elias said, I'll accept. 18 months after that rainy night, Miller Auto had become a legend in the motorcycle community. Jack had been featured in 3 major motorcycle magazines. Custom builders from across the country were sending him bikes for restoration. The waiting list for new work was 6 months long. But Jack never forgot where he came from. Every Tuesday, he reserved for what he called community service. Anyone who needed work done but couldn't afford it could come in. Jack charged only for parts, never for labor. Mrs. Chun had started a fund to help cover even those costs for people in real need. It was how Thomas Miller had run things, and it was how Jack would run things. The garage had a wall now, covered with photos. Thomas Miller's original pictures were there, but they'd been joined by new ones. Jack with his first custom build, the Iron Horseman at the rally, Elias and Jack standing next to the Panhead, and in the center, a plaque, Miller Auto, since 1985, built on skill, integrity, and brotherhood. One Tuesday afternoon, a kid came in. Couldn't have been more than 19, riding a beat-up Yamaha that sounded like it was dying. How much to make it run? The kid asked, nervous. Jack listened to the engine, diagnosed it instantly. Needs a valve adjustment, new spark plugs, oil change, and your chain's about to snap. Parts will run you maybe $200. The kid's face fell. I've got 50. Jack thought about being 24, about having $40 and a foreclosure notice, about choices and kindness and paying it forward. Tell you what, he said. You help me do the work, learn how to maintain it properly, and we'll call it even for the 50. The kid's eyes went wide. Seriously? Seriously. But you show up on time, you do what I tell you, and you learn. Deal. Deal. As Jack taught the kid how to adjust valves, how to check chain tension, how to read what an engine was telling you, he thought about Elias. About the old man who'd seen potential in a struggling mechanic and changed his life. About legacy, and how it wasn't just about what you built, but about what you taught others to build. Later that evening, after the kid had left with his now purring Yamaha and a promise to come back for more lessons, Elias stopped by. This had become tradition now. Every Tuesday evening, after community service hours, the old man would come by for coffee and conversation. "Saw you with that kid," Elias said, teaching him valve adjustment. "He needed help," Jack replied simply. "Your dad would be proud." Jack looked at Thomas Miller's picture on the wall. "I hope so." Elias set something on the workbench. It was a wrench, an old one, worn smooth by decades of use, but polished to a shine. The handle had been engraved. "To Jack Miller, for understanding that the best things in life come from helping others, the Iron Horseman." "The club voted," Elias explained. "This was my first wrench. The one I used to build that panhead in 1966. We want you to have it." Jack picked it up, feeling the weight of history in his hands. "There's something else," Elias continued. He pulled out an envelope. "The club's expanding, opening a new chapter in the next state over. They need someone to set up their official garage, train their mechanics, get things running right. You're offering me a franchise opportunity. You'd still run Miller Auto, but you'd oversee the new shop too. Train the mechanics there, set the standards, make sure they understand what quality means." Elias smiled. "Interested?" Jack thought about it for maybe 3 seconds. "When do we start?" "That's what I thought you'd say." They shook hands, sealing the deal the old-fashioned way. As Elias left, Jack stood in his garage, his father's garage, his garage, and marveled at how life had turned out. A year and a half ago, he'd been $40 from homelessness, about to lose everything. Now he owned a thriving business, had the respect of the most powerful motorcycle club in 3 states, and was about to expand into new territory. All because he'd helped an old man with a broken truck. All because he'd chosen to do the right thing when it would have been easier to do nothing. Jack looked at the golden wrench in his hand, at the photos on the wall, at the garage humming with purpose and possibility. Then he got back to work. Because that's what Miller men did. They built things. They helped people. They made the world a little better, one carefully torqued bolt at a time. And somewhere in the distance, the sound of a perfectly tuned engine rumbled through the night. Elias's old Ford truck, still running strong. A reminder that when you build something right, when you treat it with respect, when you care about the work more than the reward, it lasts forever. 5 years later, Miller Auto had become Miller Automotive, with locations in 4 states. Jack was 30, successful beyond his dreams, but he still spent every Tuesday at the original garage, doing community service work. Elias still came by for coffee. At 80, he was slowing down, but his mind was sharp as ever, and his truck, that '55 Ford, still purred like a kitten. Mrs. Chun had passed away the previous year, peacefully in her sleep. She'd left her Civic to Jack in her will, with a note. "Keep her running. Like your father kept me running when I needed it most." The Civic sat in the museum now, next to the panhead, a reminder of where it all started. The kid with the Yamaha? He was now one of Jack's head mechanics, running the second location. He'd learned the trade the right way, the Miller way, and was teaching others the same lessons. The Iron Horseman had grown to over 1,000 members, spanning 8 states. Hammer had stepped down as president, handing the role to his daughter, the first female president in the club's history. But he still rode, still brought his bikes to Jack, still treated the mechanic like family. And Rico? He'd gotten out of prison after 4 years for good behavior. Rumor was he'd moved to another state, was working an honest job for the first time in his life, and stayed far away from property development. Jack never thought about him. He was too busy building things that mattered. On a Tuesday evening in late summer, as the sun set over the city, Jack stood in the original garage where it all began. He held the golden wrench Elias had given him, looking at his reflection in the polished metal. Behind him, the sounds of engines being brought back to life, of tools being used with skill and care, of a business built on integrity thriving in a world that often forgot what that word meant. And in the distance, getting closer, the distinctive sound of a 1955 Ford truck. Elias was coming for coffee. Jack smiled, set down the wrench, and went to put on a fresh pot. Some traditions, he thought, were worth preserving. Some legacies were worth continuing. And some friendships, forged in grease and gratitude, tested by adversity, strengthened by mutual respect, lasted forever. The truck pulled up. Elias climbed out, moving a little slower these days, but still with that unmistakable presence. "Got time for an old man?" he called out. Jack grinned. "For you? Always." And in that moment, everything was exactly as it should be.